Okay. Today we're going to start Yud Beis Amud Beis, halfway down, Amar Mar. Yeah. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. And with more learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Says Amar Mar, the master taught, Neisin Shiftai, Refuasai, L'Rabbi. Talking about a person that cut off the hand of a non-Jewish slave. Not of his own slave, of someone else's slave. It says he has to pay the master for the damages that he caused. What are the damages? Well, he has to pay, first of all, the loss of money, because the guy had to work. Well, what happens to the actual nezek that he's worth less? He has to pay, of course, the nezek that he's worth less. He damaged his property. But also there's a work loss that he has, workers' compensation. Now that work doesn't go to the slave, that money goes to the master who owns the income of the slave. And also he has to pay for the doctor's bills, the person. Who does that money go to? It's also going to go to the master. Okay, now, Gemara says that we learned, nice and shifter, that the work loss, workers' compensation, and also the medical bills goes to the master. It says shifta pshita. Isn't that obvious that the work loss compensation should go to the master? The master owns everything. He owns him is like one of his properties. Umar says you're right about that. However. What the Gemara was really trying to do, what's the background to this, and why we're even discussing this? We're trying to discuss, are we saying that the master could tell him that there are certain times when the master could tell a servant that you can keep your own money, you're a slave, you can keep your own money and don't. They're here. They're here, right here on the show. Make sure you got a Gittin over there, not a Kedushin. In other words, there was a possibility that maybe the master didn't always get the money that the slave was earning, because he was telling him to feed himself, and if he was feeding himself, then maybe he was giving it. That's how this came in, because we were discussing that yesterday. So we're saying that no, the master is going to get the money always. He always gets the money, no matter what. So we said refuasa it's tzrichale. The chiddush over here is that the medical bills, nowadays this would be insurance money, goes to the master. Why? Why is that a chiddush? That's refuasa didehi. Refuasa didehi. The bayatzuive. So 1 second. This money is really going on behalf of the slave that needs it to get healed.
Right.
He doesn't just take the money from the insurance and keep it and not heal the slave. The money has a purpose. It's meant to go and heal the slave. The Gemara says, light. That's not what's happening here. Tzricha, it's necessary. Those what do they call the people that come in from insurance and they they check what the damages are and all of that. Adjusters, but is that for the same for medical bills? It's called an adjuster.
Yeah.
Oh, Dr. Stein. So these guys, they evaluate how much medical bills, how many days in the hospital he's going to have to spend. They evaluate him; it's going to be 5 days in the hospital. Okay, there's $100,000 right there. But what they did was they gave him this extra strong medicine, and he got healed in 3 days. So the rule is that the way they evaluate him, that's the money that he gets. If it comes out a little different, he ends up keeping the extra. So why over here did it come out different? Because he took this extra painful medicine, and so really he's earned himself 2 days of medical insurance, 2 days of insurance money. Well, Mal de Temetzar Dideyu, I could have thought that that's his pain, and his pain he keeps. The slave himself should keep it. Kamash Malan, that it belongs to the master, because any income that comes through the slave belongs to the master, even if it's pain. I could have thought the pain was his own. I didn't say a bracha yet, right?
What about in the case where this is the extra money? What about in that case if
There's a deficiency. You probably have to go back to the person and reassess. Why don't they reassess when there's extra? I'm not sure. You have to wait for Baba Kama. This is a Baba Kama discussion. Yeah. After
everything
Sukkot.
after. So if you spend 5, 7 days, whatever the medical bill is, they could get out of it. And it's funny, like the secular way, it's kind of like the same thing. Like if probably someone gets their hand cut in a job, they give them the amount like
A lump sum. Someone was saying that when they went to the doctor, they tell the doctor the first thing. First of all, you should know that over 50% of all medical billings is all fraud. Okay, now let's discuss, just to set the stage. Now the other 50 isn't yet. Okay. Tanya, starting a brisa. We're going back to discuss the two cases that someone tells a messenger, he says, take this get and give it to my wife. Or he says, take this deed of manumission and give it to my slave. So Reb Meir held that until the documents reach the recipient, he can always retract. We don't say that the messenger has acquired it on behalf of the recipient immediately. We don't say that. We say it has to reach the recipient. Now, why does it need to reach the recipient? We said because both of those are to the detriment of the recipient. For a woman to be divorced is to her detriment because she always has income. If she's married, her husband sustains her. And the slave also has a benefit to be a slave, which is more of a benefit than it would be for him to be free. Now, the sages argued on Reb Meir. The sages said, no, there's a benefit for the slave to be free, and therefore the slave is immediately emancipated, because when the messenger receives it, he's received it on behalf of the slave, which he can do if it's to his betterment. Yeah. Okay. So now that we had in the Mishnah. Now we go back. We have a brisa that discusses the details of that conversation. So it goes like this: Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amarnu Leila Meir. We told our friend Meir, Rabbi Lazar is Rabbi Lazar ben Shemua. He's a friend of Rabbi Meir, so he calls him by his first name. He says, this was the conversation. He says, it's to the betterment of the slave. This is to the benefit of the slave to go free. But of course, he'd rather be free. Amar Lano, so Rabbi Meir said back to us, no, it's actually to his detriment. Because if he's a slave of a kayan, the master is a kayan. The rule is that when the master acquires anything that's in his household is allowed to eat truma. That's including the slaves, as well as family, his wife, even she comes from a different family, and the slaves are also they're allowed to eat truma. And now the slave goes free, can't eat truma. Used to be the slave could walk around town and everyone would say, "Oh, slave, and give some truma." Amar no law, we said back to him, 1 second. He doesn't have to feed him at all. Master doesn't need to feed a slave. I mean, if he wants him to work well, he'll probably feed him. But if he doesn't care about him, he could just say, "Okay, I'm not feeding you. Go figure it out." And so if that's the case, by him setting him free, he'll figure it out anyway. Even while he was a slave, he had to figure it out. Now he'll figure it out as well. Amar Lano, so Reb Meir said back to us, let's say the slave ran away, or the woman rebelled and ran away. They still eat truma if they're married. But this one doesn't eat. So I know the slave, the master doesn't have to feed the slave, but the slave could still eat it. And now the slave can't eat it from someone else, right? Truma that someone else is giving. But okay, now here's the sages say, by the way, we do admit to one point, the woman does get her sustenance from the husband, and here it's clearly a problem to her detriment when she's being divorced. That we agree to you that she's only divorced when she actually receives the document, not when the messenger receives the document on her behalf. That doesn't matter, unless she agrees to it, unless she sent the messenger.
He'll continue to eat truma until he receives the paper also.
He said the slave will continue to eat truma, yeah, because he's still under the jurisdiction of his master, even though he's not there, he's not in that location. We had cases where it would be to the betterment, to the benefit of the woman to be divorced. For example, if they were already legally divorced, and she just never got her get. She's already remarried to someone else, and we just can't find her, or whatever. She's in some other country we can't access. Could we appoint the messenger to receive the get on her behalf? The husband wants to get remarried, and we know it's to her betterment, to her benefit. Of course, it would make sense that we should say yes, because she's not getting any income from him, and there's no reason why she should not. There's only a benefit, halachic benefits, and she got married civilly. By Torah law, it's adultery. So it would be only to her betterment to receive the get. We're not discussing that case here. As in a normal case, it's to her detriment. But there could be scenarios where it would change. Okay. So the Gemara now discusses what was the conversation here? What was the back and forth? What was really going on? Especially in this last point where it says the slave runs away. What are we talking about? The slave running away. Okay. Gemara says, this is what he was telling to the sages, Reb Meir. You responded to me well that the master does not need to provide a slave with food. So therefore, if the slave is a slave or the slave is not a slave, the master doesn't need to provide him with food either way. So you're right that there's that Shavtuni. This is Reb Meir telling to them that the master can tell the slave that I'm not supporting you. Now when the slave goes free, still not supporting him. Good. Still not supporting him, which means that it's to the betterment of the slave to be free. The master didn't have to support him anyway, even when he was a slave. Reb Meir is making it like it's to the detriment of the slave to be free. They're saying, why is it to the detriment? The master didn't have to support him while he was a slave. So he's not losing by being free.
Unless he could, as a priest.
Unless he was, okay, yeah. So but how are you going to answer me regarding truma? Reb Meir is saying that he used to be able to eat truma, now he can't eat truma, so it's to his detriment.
For anybody,
right? This is Reb Meir's question on them. Maybe you could say like this: if the master wants him to go free, he could just throw the get at him, and he's already free. He doesn't need his consent So when the messenger takes it also, he's free. Because the master could have freed him anyway. It's not really to his detriment what the messenger is doing, because the master could have done it on his own. Just throw it at him and he's free. Gemara says, but the slave can avoid that situation by always running away and never being available to receive the get when the master wants to free him. It's like, right. So, this is like, remember there was like this big red joke book, Jewish joke book. It was like the red joke book. Anyway, in there was this, they joked about one of these rabbis. He said he was always traveling and never at his community. So they said, how come they don't fire you? He says, I'm never there for them to fire me. So anyway, that's what's going on here. The slave, he's never around for him to get fired as a slave. So
Emancipated.
To be emancipated, yeah, a slave doesn't get fired. So so he can run away, and then the master can't free him. So what's happening now is that he's only getting freed because of the messenger. The messenger is requiring it on his behalf. It's going to be to his detriment. He can't eat truma. So they said, "Ma ilu evet kayin shabarach ve'eshes kayin shemar dal ba'ala lo yechel mit truma v'ze'eino yechel." In this case, if he would have run away, he would still be able to eat. But now that the messenger is taking it on his behalf, he can't eat truma. The Gemara says, "Shaper kamalu." This is a good claim. Amarava, so Rava says back, what was the response back from the sages? The Mishnah says that the words of the Mishnah were the response that the sages gave to Rav Meir was that no, the fact that he eats truma, that's because he's his property. He said, we asked when we learned the Mishnah, what does that mean? He's his property. So what? The fact is he can still eat truma, and now we can't eat truma. So the messenger acquiring on his behalf is to his detriment. What's the difference? What the background to it is? So now we're explaining, no. What we mean to say is that the fact that the slave runs away and he's not around to be emancipated, that's not a real answer, because the master could go like this. He's the possession of the master. The master can just go over to any Jewish person and say, you have $1. Okay, the slave that used to be mine is now yours. And then once he leaves his possession, so he goes over to be a Yisrael. So the master can anyways get him out of eating truma whenever he wants. He could always get him out of his possession. It doesn't have to be there for him to free him. He could free him not free him, but he can pass him on to someone else. We won't be able to eat truma. So therefore, the messenger acquiring the slave is not to his detriment, because the master could have done it anyway.
The slave ran away, and the master does either one or the other. The slave won't know, so he might still be eating truma.
Yeah. Okay. Asking, but who's going to tell the slave about this? Yeah.
If he's a runaway, he'll keep eating truma.
He gets reports. These guys, they get reports back. They have their slave underground. Right.
I don't think so.
It would have to be a local area.
He's eating the boss's truma. He's walking around collecting truma from people on the street. Doesn't make any sense. He's a slave.
No, but they're allowed to give him their truma.
Who?
Other people. Yeah, that's what we're learning. We're learning that he's going to go around and eat truma from other people. They're giving the truma. Maybe not. They're not giving it to him. Maybe they're giving it to his master, and he's eating it as one of the people that's allowed to eat his master's truma. He would come around and they would say, "Oh, you're a slave from so and so. You was wearing the right slave shirt from the Kayan, house." And they'd say, "Okay, can you bring this over and eat it?" Okay.
Even though he's been freed.
No, only before he's been freed.
Right.
Once he's freed, then he can't eat it. That's what we're saying. It's supposed would be to his detriment to be free.
If he's not showing up to work, he's not eating the boss's truma. So does he care? Let him work. Why would the boss care to free him?
The boss wants to free him.
Why? It's not costing him anything.
Oh,
He's not showing up to work. He's not eating my food. So what do I care?
yeah.
Would there be a liability to the boss if that slave goes out of the
Small liability if the slave does damage. The master doesn't necessarily need to pay for it, but it's still not good for him to have that. Maybe he doesn't want him because he doesn't want him. The guy was reckless. Okay. Well, the Reb Meir, according to Reb Meir, this is a great discussion. But Teinach Eved Kayan, that's only if he's the slave of a Kayan. What about change the situation, the scenario a little bit? What happens? Eved Yisrael Ma'yikal Meimai. Let's say his master wasn't a Kayan. Could the messenger take the document on behalf of the slave? Because there's no truma there. It's regular Yisrael. This whole discussion was only in one case where this was the slave of a Kayan. But if the master's not a Kayan, then everything switches. It says Amar of Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak. You have a totally new answer. The slave rather be with a non-Jewish maid than to be with a Jewish woman. So when he's freed, he becomes Jewish. So as a slave, he hangs around with the non-Jewish maids. He's very happy. Gemara says, Adarabba, 1 second. Now that he's free, he can marry any woman that he wants. Any of the free women, which would be better for him. Says no. A slave rather be married to another slave because because he treats her, he does whatever he wants with her, and he behaves with her in any promiscuous fashion, and that's the way the slaves are. With the slave women, he doesn't have to behave in the same upright fashion that he would have to if he would marry a regular woman. So it's better for him. It's more enjoyable for him to be a slave and to marry a slave woman than to be free and to have to marry a woman that's going to tell him what to do. Yeah. That's how it works. Yeah, Hill mentions that at one point that when you free a slave, he becomes Jewish. Okay. Start a new Mishnah. Ha'imer. Someone that says the new gets el ishti, shtar shecher zel avdi. What was the last case? Last case was Ha'imer tain gets el ishti, shtar shecher. There's a difference between tain or tenu. Tenu is you all, which is not really appointing a messenger. It's just giving instructions, but saying what he would like without giving it to a messenger specifically. The last Mishnah was when he gives it to a messenger, and then we had a question, does the messenger acquire it in his behalf? Here it's tenu in the plural. He says, give this get to my wife, give this document of manumission to my slave, but then he died. So it should not be given after he passed away. And the reason for this we explained in the Gemara before was that he's not the master anymore. Now the wife doesn't need a get; she can get remarried because her husband died, unless there's a brother that would affect the yibum. It would affect, would create a scenario where there's yibum required. Then the get would be a benefit there. Whatever the case is here. The husband or the master dies, it's not allowed to be given lachamisa. What about tenu manalish plain? Let's say he says, give that $100 over there, give this to so and so, and then he dies. Lachamisa, that is given after his death. So this is interesting because really the inheritors should show up, and and take it. The answer to this is it must be divrei shchiv mira. The words of a shchiv mira, a special takana. When someone's on his deathbed, that it's considered given. So it's still it's given already. This case that you just mentioned about giving the money, that's only. Let me just go back 1 second to this. Where did we quote this before? Daf Testament days. Yeah, it was clear. We were learning because of divrei shchiv mira. Okay. So Rav, as being set over by Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, he qualifies this Mishnah. He says that case is only the money needs to be tied up, placed in a corner, and designated as if it exists here in a certain location. That's the only case where you can say, give this money to so and so. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem, and we're not going to say that the money is given already. So, what are we talking about? If we're talking about that it's a healthy person, what are you saying that it's given over? This discussion that we already made a decision that it's talking about a shchiv mira. The Gemara is going through it. Shchiv mira is someone that's ill, right? On his deathbed. If it's talking about a healthy person, then what's the difference if it's tied up and it's the recipient never received it? Mashach would be he never pulled it, but over here we mean he didn't make a kinyan on it. Well, b'shchiv mira must be talking about what we're talking about someone on his deathbed. If it's on his deathbed, then my tziburin. Why does it need to be tied up? He ain't tziburin nami. Even if it's not tied up, the kaimlan the divrei shchiv mira ksub dami. We have a rule that whatever the shchiv mira says, whatever the mira means ill, whatever the person laying ill says is considered like it's already done. And the sages instituted that so that he doesn't feel distressed that what he's saying may not be fulfilled. So they said that it's in effect immediately whatever he says. Well, so why does it have to be tied up if that's the case? So we take it like this, we have a problem. Amar Rav Zvid. Rav Zvid said, Lailam Bebari, talking about that the person is really healthy. Rav Huna Amarav, and we're dealing here with a special case. It's like Rav Huna says in the name of Rav, Amar Rav Huna Amarav. Rav Huna says in the name of Rav. Now it's like Rav helping the situation with Rav. Because Rav was the one that told us that it needs to be tied up. So we quote another case of Rav to explain it. It says, Manali biyadcha. If someone says to another person, you owe me money, so because I lent it to you. So Reuven tells Shimon, you owe me money. Tanei leplani, give it to Levi. The Maimet Shlashtam, and all three are there. So Kana. So he acquires it. Now, what we're saying is like this, that we're not talking about over here, at least the way that we have to explain this Gemara right now, is that we're not talking over here where the money was lent. I said it was lent, that's a mistake. The money was there in Shimon's possession just as a guardian. So that money, when Reuven tells Shimon that there's money in your possession that belongs to me, just give it to Levi. The rule is, according to Rav says this, that when you have the three people there, even without making a kinyan, the money already belongs to Levi. He was able to transfer that directly over to Levi. So what's happening over here is like this. When the guy is saying, what's going on? The adjuster. When the guy is saying that to give this money, this $100, so-and-so, really, let's put the names in. Reuven is saying to give the money to Levi. He's actually saying the money that's in the house of Shimon. Now, when Rav said that it's tied up and put in the corner, talking about which corner? In Shimon's house. And Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are all there. And when he says to them that the money that's tied up and put in your corner, in your safe, should now belong to Levi, that's called Maimet Shlashtan. And the rule is that it's given over even without any transaction. Just that statement transfers his ownership over to Levi. Okay, so now according to Rav Zvid, we're talking about it's a healthy person, and this is a special type of transaction where the ownership can go over with just verbally. But Papa says we're dealing with someone on his deathbed. Look at the idach to Rav, and it's a different halach of Rav. The Marav Shilmira Shamer Tinu Manalaplani Minachasai Mana Zen nice the Mana Stami nice and Cheshin Shema Mana cover kamer. Rav was concerned that when a shchiv mira, when a person on his deathbed says that certain money should be given to so and so, he has a concern that maybe he's not referring to just any money that he has in the bank. He's referring specifically to a certain money that he has buried, because the other money that he has is really has other usage, has other things that it's meant for. So Rav says that if he designates the money, if the person on his deathbed designates the money, then that money is immediately transferred over to the other person. But if the money wasn't designated, then we're concerned that maybe what he really meant was money that he has in his backyard that's buried, and he can't give any of the other money, only that one. When you dig it up, that's the one that's supposed to go. So this Rav has a concern that it needs to be designated. So if that's the case, so when Rav says that it has to be tied up and put in the corner, and then he says that money, so he's talking about a shchiv mira, that even by a shchiv mira it needs to be designated. However, the Gemara just concludes, we don't paskin like that, like that. The rule is not like that. The rule is that if a shchiv mira, someone on his deathbed, says that money should be given to someone else, it's automatically given, even if he doesn't say specifically which bundle of money it is. If he says this one, or if he says any, right? And now the Gemara goes through. We have two explanations for the statement of Rav on the Mishnah that it needs to be tied up. Rav said that the money needs to be tied up and designated for it to be transferred over. So we have Rav Papa and we have Rav Zvid. Rav Zvid said that we're dealing with a healthy person, and it's a special halacha of Maimet Shlashtan. When three people are there, the money is transferred. That was Rav Zvid. That was Rav Zvid's. And Rav Papa said that it's dealing with the shchiv mira, that is dealing with someone on his deathbed, and it's a special ruling that only Rav holds up. Rav Papa, my time aliyamaka Rav Zvid. Why doesn't Rav Papa say like Rav Zvid? Rav Zvid would have a better pshat, because you don't have to say that it's not, that it's against the halacha. Could have said that we're dealing with a healthy person, and we would say that it's a story of Maimet Shlashtan. Kasavar Rav Papa. The reason why he didn't do that, Rav Papa holds Kiyam Rav. When did Rav say that Maimet Shlashtan works? Maimet Shlashtan is the three people are all there together. Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven has money that's sitting in Shimon's house. He tells Shimon that he should give the money to Levi. That's Maimet Shlashtan. Rav Papa holds that Rav says that Leishna b'milva, Leishna b'pikadan, that it doesn't need to be money that's sitting there. It could even be money that's been lent to Shimon, and it still works Maimet Shlashtan, even though the money is not in existence, because money that's lent is not in existence. Money lent is already spent. But when he has to pay it back, right? If it's money that's deposited there as a guardian, so then that exists. But here we're saying that it doesn't have to be that. It could even be money that was lent. It's now so if that's the case, then Rav's statement that the money needs to be in existence and sitting there, it doesn't apply, because the same halacha would apply even if it was money that was lent. Rav Zvid, my time Rav Papa. Why doesn't Rav Zvid say like Rav Papa that we're dealing with the shchiv mira? It says Lei mesuk masnisim b'shchiv mira. Mishnah can't be a shchiv mira. Okay, now get ready for a very critical reading of the Mishnah. Mimai, how do you know the Mishnah can't be a shchiv mira? It says like this. Midiktani, because if you read the Mishnah very, very carefully, it says someone that says Tnu get avdi, give this get to my wife, give this document to my slave, and the person dies, it should not be given after he passed away. Taima the mace. What's the reason why it shouldn't be given?
Originally, when you read the Mishnah, Umace, I thought Umace went on the woman or the slave.
No, mace is talking about the giver, the one that's right.
Okay, go on.
Taima the mace. The reason why it should not be given is because the person died. But if the person is still alive, then nice, and then you do give it. Taima, Damar Tenu. Why do you give it? Because he said Tenu, which means to give. Tenu. But if he doesn't say give it, nice, and then you wouldn't give it even if he was alive. Only problem is if he would have been on his deathbed, he wouldn't have had to say give it. Because by a shriv mira, by someone on his deathbed, even if he says write the document, that would be enough. Even leaving out the instructions of Tenu, we say that someone on his deathbed maybe was distressed and he didn't think of all the details, but we know what he means. And when he says write the document, he means give it. So the fact that our Mishnah says Tenu, and the reason why it's not given is because he died, but if he would still be alive, then it would be given. But then we wouldn't have needed the word Tenu. Then we would need, then Kisva would have been enough. Just write it would have been enough.
Which one is more beneficial to the woman, being the divorcee or a widow?
Because there's a brother, we're assuming that this scenario was, why does he have to give her a get? Because there's a brother, he has a younger brother that she would have to wait 13 years before she could marry him.
A widower can also remarry a guy. I'm sorry, a Kain.
Kayan, he could also remarry. I was surprised.
Yeah, it's fine.
Threw me off.
Unless he was paying attention.
Yeah.
That was
So he could marry a Kayan.
that was the Ebed Canaan they wanted to
A
say.
So that would be-
can now remarry a Kain. She has
Yeah.
a slightly smaller pool to pick from.
Right. So in a way, it would be better for in that. See, we're saying that he wants her to be divorced
Yes.
because of the Yivam issue.
Yes.
He's not concerned that she's not going to be able to marry a Kayan.
One kind to each.
He said if he would pass away and she'll be with him, she'll be entitled to the estate.
Should be entitled to the state, but she's entitled to the state whether she's divorced or a widow.
She's divorced, which is really super.
Well, she can live on the estate until she takes the ksuba. In both cases, she lives off the estate until she takes the ksuba. Yeah, you're going back into ksuba. Yeah, if she takes the full ksuba, then she's off. If she doesn't take all of that lump sum, then she can live off the estate for as long as she wants until she's remarried. If there's what to live off. Okay, so that's why Rav Papa didn't want to say that we're dealing with. That's why Rav Zvid didn't want to say we're dealing with a shriv mira, because the shriv mira, the term tenu would not be necessary. Now there is a question on this, but leave it alone. That's good enough. Ditnan, started in the Mishnah. Originally they said a yetzi b'koilar, someone that's being taken out in a collar, means in handcuffs or something, and chains.
Here has it as a
Neck chain.
That's interesting. That's the term that police use when they arrest someone, cover.
Yeah, so that's the Gemara term. Yeah, it must be like a Greek or Roman term. The Yetzi B'Koilar. And he said, Kisvu get lishti. He says, write a get to my wife. Now notice he didn't say Tenu. He's being taken out to be killed. He says, write a get to my wife. They're allowed to write and give it, even though he didn't say give it. And, you need the instructions from the husband, but we assume that that's what he meant. But because he's so distressed about his situation, he wasn't able to think through all the details. Then after that, they said, the same thing as someone that's going out on a boat, or someone that's going out through the desert, and the caravan is about to leave, the boat's about to leave, and he shouts out, we say that he's also under distress, even though he's not being taken out to be killed, but the stress that he has, he's going to miss the boat, he's going to these things, miss the plane, so he's not able to think of all the details, but he really means it should be written and given, even though he only said written. Reb Shimon Shizuri, Reb Shimon Shizuri says even someone that's ill, the same thing, we say kisvu is enough. So based on this, Rav Zvid says, I'm not going to learn like Rav Papa, because based on Reb Shimon Shizuri, he didn't have to say Tenu. It must be that the Mishnah is not talking about a shchiv mira, someone that's on his deathbed. Maskevla Rav Ashi asked the question, Man nemal on the mastis and Reb Shimon Shizuri, Dilma Rabbanani. you're asking a question based on an assumption that the Mishnah is Reb Shimon Shazuri. And Reb Shimon Shazuri, according to Reb Shimon Shazuri, you don't have to say Tenu, give it. You could have said Kisfu. But there's two other opinions there that say that you do need to say kiss, you do need to say Tenu. So you're saying that it can't be Rav Papa, the way Rav Papa is explaining it, only because you chose that the Mishnah is Reb Shimon Shazuri, which you didn't have to do. Okay. Well, he leaves that as a question. Gufa. Let's go back to discuss something that was mentioned in passing by Rav. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Huna says the name of Rav, Manali Biyadcha. If someone says, Reuven tells Shimon that there's $100 of mine in your hands, give it to someone else, and he says this whole statement, when they're all three of them are together. Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven deposited money with Shimon, and he tells Shimon to give the money to Levi. Kana, Levi acquires it. Amar Rava says, Mistaber Milsa de Rabba Pikadon. It makes sense that Rav would have said this by a Pikadon when the money actually exists. Pikadon means it's given as a deposit. It's deposited by a watchman, or by by a guardian. Aval b'milveh, but if it would have been given, if he lent it to him, then that would be a different story because the money doesn't exist. And how's he giving it over if it doesn't exist? Well, he says, I'm not sure who's saying this. Well, he can't. It would make sense to say this. However, Elikim, but by God, Amar Rav Afila b'milveh. This is he's like swearing. He's saying, but Rav said that it applies even by a milveh, even by a loan. Okay. Itmanami. Will you even have other sources that it applies to a loan as well? It says, Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi. Shmuel says in the name of Levi. Levi is a student of Rebbe, he's a friend of Rav. Milveli biyadcha. I have a debt that's in your hands. In other words, you owe me money. Give it to so-and-so, give it to Levi. And he says this in front of the borrower, and he says in front of Levi. So Kana, Levi has acquired the rights to collect that. Time am I? What's the reason? Amar Meimar says it's because Shimon becomes indebted to Reuven at the time when he borrows the money, and he becomes indebted to Reuven and anyone that comes on Reuven's behalf, which right now is Levi. So Shimon is taking on not just the debt to Reuven, but he's taking on a debt to Reuven and all his family. And here, let's include Levi in that because Levi is now the new owner of this debt. Okay. Amali Ravashi la Meimar. Ravashi says, 1 second. Ravashi says to Meimar Elamayata. That's the case. Hikne linoldim delay habi b'shas matan mayis. Hachinami delay kanu. Let's say he wants to give it over to someone that was just born, to a youngster. This was an old debt. He goes to Shimon and he says, together with Levi, Levi is a young kid. He says, even though when I lent you the money, Levi wasn't born yet, but now I want you to give the money to Levi. So if the way that this works is that because when Shimon accepted the obligation to pay Reuven back, that obligation included anyone that comes on behalf of Reuven, which includes Levi. That would only be if Levi was around at that time. But Levi was only born afterwards. It says, Afilu Rab Meir, even according to Rab Meir, that a person can give over something, can transfer ownership of something that doesn't exist. But he can only transfer ownership of something that doesn't exist to someone that exists. But not to someone that doesn't exist. And at that time, when the money was being lent, Levi wasn't around. Elamar Ravashi has a different shot. It says, "Vahi anad kamishtanale in Malva Yeshana." Is it Malva or Milva? What do you have in the thing? Maybe Milva. In milva means the debt, and malva means the lender. How do they translate? How do they put the vowels in the neck? The milva, milva, the debt. The fact that the debt is restarting because now we have a new person that's collecting it. So Gomer Mashabed Nafshe, so he agrees. Shimon agrees that he's willing to now pay it to Levi. So the question is, how does this money just transfer he has a debt to Reuven. Now all of a sudden he has a debt to Levi. How did that happen? He says, no, I'm not paying Levi. Maybe he could say that. He says, no. Since he's gaining from this, so he's automatically agreeing to that. Why? What does he gain? He gains that by Reuven, this debt was already given over to the collection agencies. Now that it's transferred over to Levi, he gets to restart. He has another 30 days before it goes into default or whatever. He says that would make sense in some cases, however, but there are some cases. Gainhani the Beit Bar El Yashiv was a very strong family, the house of Bar El Yashiv. Kafti v'shaklu alta, they don't even wait a moment. If you owe them money, they come in and they just grab everything that you have. So you're going to say that in that case, you're going to say the Maimet Shlashtim doesn't work, that it's because the only reason why he gave it was because he would gain him some extra time before he pays it back. Maybe you'll say that's the case, that's true. It only works in certain cases. And we have a problem. We don't like when the words of the sages don't apply in every case equally. We want it to work equally in every case, not like this. It's going to be, it depends what the scenario was. It's inconsistent. So Elamar Marzutra says, we do have 3 statements from the rabbis that's the rule, and we don't really have an explanation for it, but that's just how it is. One of them, Chadaha, is this, that Maimet Shlashton works. That's the rule. Reuven tells Shimon, the money that you have of mine should be given to Levi, whether it was a loan or whether it was a deposit, whatever it is, it goes over to Levi. How do we explain how that transfer takes place? We don't have an explanation, but that's what the rabbis said. The Idach, another rule is the Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel, a case of Kol Nechasav Leishtei Lo Yaseh L'Apotropia. Someone says that his wife is in charge of all his things, not just in charge, but he gives everything to his wife. She's not really the owner of it. She's just in charge of it, but she's not the owner, which means that, I guess it means that she can't sell it. She can do what she wants, like do this and do that, but she can't sell it. She can't get rid of it. The Idach, another statement that we don't have an explanation for, Damar Rab Chananya, Hamasi Isha Libnai Gadol Bebayas Kanai. If someone marries off his son to a woman and the son is in a house, so the son acquires that house. What we're talking about here is if a person takes all his possessions out of a certain house and puts his son in there, and then he marries his son off, so that house belongs to the son. It's as if he gave that house to the son.
Wow. Just by virtue of his having had a chasana there?
Yeah. Do they add any explanation, or this is like, as the Gemara says, there's no explanation for it?
Does it count for daughter?
Doesn't say that. It's only Libnai Gadol. Because Libnai Gadol means a son that's over bar mitzvah. Doesn't mean his oldest son. I don't know. Okay, let's leave it over here. Eldest. Okay, that makes sense.